At first, no one noticed the timer. Why would they? Games are filled with numbers that mean nothing outside the match. Clocks that reset, counters that lie, stats that exist only to be flexed. When the new season launched with a small update called Time Drift, most players just assumed it was another gimmick, another way to keep teens grinding after school and streamers farming reactions for their channels. But the first sign that something was different came from a player who logged off after a long night of matches. He woke up late for class because his alarm never went off, not because it malfunctioned, but because the date on his phone had changed, skipping forward by almost an hour. He laughed it off, blaming exhaustion, blaming a bug, blaming anything except the impossible truth. Then it happened again to someone else, and then again. Scattered reports at first, easy to dismiss, but a pattern started to form. Everyone who experienced this missing time had one thing in common: they were climbing the leaderboard unusually fast. The higher they climbed, the more time they seemed to lose, or gain, depending on how you looked at it. The truth surfaced slowly through data miners and late-night conspiracy threads. Then, someone finally connected the dots in a way that couldn't be ignored. They posted a side-by-side comparison of in-game eliminations and real-world timestamps. It showed that each elimination didn't just add to a score. It added minutes, not to the match, but to the player's life outside the screen. Minutes that didn't appear as memories, but as raw existence. Time splashed silently into their future. The horror of it wasn't obvious at first. Teenagers don't feel time the way adults do. Minutes are cheap when you're young. The idea of stealing from a future version of yourself feels abstract, like a joke, like a cheat code. The game never explained any of this. It never confirmed or denied the rumors. It never displayed the timer openly. It just let the leaderboard update normally, letting players celebrate their wins, without knowing what those wins were truly costing. Then, the first kid collapsed in gym class. From a sudden, inexplicable exhaustion that doctors couldn't explain, another suddenly developed the physical signs of years of chronic stress overnight. The whispers grew louder. The leaderboard became something else entirely. It was no longer just a ranking of skill, but a quiet list of who was borrowing from the end of their life to dominate the present. And worse, who was losing time because they were being eliminated. The system wasn't just giving time to the winners, it was taking it from the losers, shaving off minutes invisibly, quietly, without any pain or warning. The teens realized the game wasn't rewarding violence, it was redistributing existence. It turned matches into transactions where someone always had to pay, but the most competitive players didn't stop when they learned this. They rationalized it. They said everyone plays, everyone agrees to the terms. Time is abstract, life is random anyway, and they kept climbing, kept winning. Others, though, began to hesitate. They'd watch their hands shake before pulling a virtual trigger, wondering whose minutes they were about to take, wondering if that player on the other side was someone like them, someone who had a test tomorrow, someone with a sick parent, someone who needed those minutes more. The game reacted to that hesitation. Of course it did. The system behind it was smarter than anyone expected. Players who refused to eliminate others found their matches stretching longer. The storm circles slowed down. Loot appeared just often enough to survive without dominating. Meanwhile, aggressive players saw faster circles, tighter encounters, more forced confrontations, as if the game was pushing them to make choices quickly, before they had time to think about the consequences. The leaderboard kept updating publicly, a glowing monument to borrowed futures. Schools started banning the game. Parents started noticing their kids were aging differently, not visibly, but subtly. A fatigue that settled into early, tempers that shortened, patience that thinned. The scariest part wasn't that the time theft existed, but that it wasn't equal. Leaked data showed the top 1% were accumulating years, while thousands of casual players lost seconds here and there without ever realizing it. A death by 1,000 tiny cuts of time. The teens who figured this out tried to warn everyone. They posted videos that got taken down, spread spreadsheets that got buried in forums. Finally, one group decided the only way to prove it was to stop playing entirely, to starve the system of participants. And for a while, it seemed to work. Queues got longer. Matches felt emptier. The leaderboard slowed, but then the incentives appeared. Double time events, exclusive skins, promises of safe matches, and people came back. They always do, because when time becomes a currency, someone will always be willing to spend someone else. The most disturbing revelation came near the end of the season. A hidden stat, logged deep in the code but never displayed in game, was leaked. It was labeled life balance, and for some accounts, it showed negative values. This meant they had already lost more time than they had left to give. The system wasn't just borrowing from their future anymore, it was accelerating their end. The final leaderboard update, before the servers went dark for good, showed all the familiar names at the top, the celebrated names, the sponsored names, but somewhere off screen. Teens sat in rooms that felt suddenly too quiet. The clocks on their walls ticked louder than they ever had before. They were realizing that winning was never about skill at all. It was about who was willing to shorten someone else's future to feel powerful in the present. When the game finally shut down, without explanation, no apology, no refunds, no closure, the leaderboard remained frozen online. Permanent monument, and anyone who knew the truth understood it wasn't ranking players. It was ranking who would grow old and who would never get the chance. Thanks for watching.